This
Good morning,
conference will
everyone.
now be recorded.
Welcome to our Audit Compliance and Governance meeting on Tuesday, January 18th. We're going to start off with a few announcements. Please mute your microphone. If you're capable to have your video on, obviously we would prefer that so we can have as much of an interactive conversation as possible. If you aren't being heard, just raise your hand and ask a question in the chat box. We are going to be recording this meeting per Executive Order 7B, and we'll be posting these materials. And before you talk, we would just ask that you state your name for the record. Thank you so much. All right. Now, hopefully this works. All right. All right, we're going to now pass it over to you, to Tom, to start your first meeting. We're very excited to have you as our ACG chair. So we'll hand over the gavel to you to call the meeting to order.
Thanks so much, Brian. Huge shoes to fill. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and go to the agenda, please.
The first item would be if there's any public comments. Are there any?
Does anybody have anything? Seeing none, we'll go to the second item. And can I have a motion to approve the minutes from October 12th meeting?
So moved. It's Matt.
Matt, thank you. Do we have a second?
Lonnie, I second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
You're opposed?
This is Jeff Beckham. I'm going to abstain. Wasn't on the committee at that point.
Right. Thank you, Jeff. Is there any, somebody said aye when I asked for opposed. Can I have who that was? Or was that errant? I'm going to take that it was errant. So we have approved and we have one abstention. Can we move on, please? Let's review the 20 to 2021 audit report. Brian, who am I kicking it over to at this point?
That's going to be Brian Garcia and Eric Schrago are going to handle this one item.
Great.
Eric Schrago.
Hey, so I just wanted to give the committee an update on our most recent SOC 2 certification. So the SOC 2 is the Service Organization Control, and we performed a Type 2 audit. Basically, this is an evaluation of the organization's controls with the perspective of data and privacy, but it's a good test of our controls just in general. They evaluate our compliance against 5 trust principles, those being privacy, security, availability, confidentiality, and then the integrity of our processes. So that's basically, they go through and they document all the controls that we say that we have in place, and then they go through and test them to make sure that they work. This was the 3rd time that we did it, and we received a favorable opinion. We are in full compliance. This is kind of become the gold standard, SOC 2. It's, from my understanding, and Jane may be able to speak to this a little bit more from an accounting perspective, but the AICPA has pushed the SOC Type 2 as a replacement for the SAS 70, which was very much in vogue 10 years ago. So not too many organizations have completed a full-on SOC 2. A lot of them have done a SOC 1. A SOC 1 is just a listing of control. A SOC 2 is the actual test. So it's a very good thing that we have demonstrated our own compliance with this, and just keeps us on our toes. So just an update for the committee there. We included in the mailing the summary in the opinion. We purposely left out the actual controls. If anybody on the committee does have any questions or wants to see that level of detail, I'm happy to provide that offline.
Eric, it's Tom. Can I just see that level of detail just so I understand what we're talking about, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. I will get you a copy of that.
Thanks. And quick question for you, and then I'll turn it over and open it to questions. So it says here that we've done this 3 times. What's the go forward plan related to this?
Typically, you should do it every year.
Yep.
which is about what we have been doing the past couple of years. I think we had, there's a transition of our audit team from Markham to Bloom Shapiro, and then Bloom became part of CLA. Their move from Markham to Bloom kind of made us go about an 18-month period. We did do that audit to cover that full period, so we don't have any gaps in our audit history there. And so we will do this again probably next September. I think that what we'll most likely do is issue an RFP sometime next summer, just to identify, make sure that we have the right audit team looking at things. I think we have a great team at CLA, but it's always good to have a fresh set of eyes. So
Great. Jane Murphy, just as you were referenced, do you have anything you'd like to add to these comments?
Actually, no. It's pretty much what Eric said is fine. He's really been the controller of these reports, and I've really been more on the financial side. So if I had Dan Smith here, he might be able to add a little bit more color. But I'm good with what Eric's got. Thanks.
Sure. Is there anybody that has any questions on the report or on this in general?
Tom, just a question. Are there any recommendations that come out of it? I mean, it sounds like we got a good sort of score, if you will, but
So
I know we had spoken about having Jane and her team at the last meeting with our auditors come up with a, or let us know if there are things we should be doing differently that would make
Right.
the audit process easier. Does this make any recommendations that would relate to that, or are we going to get to that item on the agenda after this?
So in terms of the financial audit, there isn't a huge amount of overlap from one to the other. Ultimately, having strong controls on this end means that there's a higher level of integrity around the finances, the financials. In terms of recommendations from the auditors, there were a handful of minor points along the way. Nothing to the point that it serves as memory. It was more of, hey, maybe you should save this file here as opposed to there type thing. We are going to have a debrief session, which I think is probably that level of recommendation from them that's scheduled from a couple weeks from now. And I'll pass on the minutes of that meeting to this group if you guys are interested. In terms of formal recommendations and things that we need to address, there weren't really anything in that audit. So.
Okay.
Matt, any follow-ups?
No, thank you.
Sure. Anyone else have any questions on this item? Seeing none, thank you so much. Congratulations on the evaluation. We look forward to hearing more. I do look forward to seeing how those recommendations or anything that they've said get implemented or at least addressed, Eric, over the next year so that we can continue to keep our good rating. So I appreciate that.
Certainly.
We'll go to item number 5, which is the recommendation of the selection of the audit firm for audit services for the next couple of years. Quick question here on the agenda. It says recommendation. Is this a voting item this morning?
It was intended to be a voting item, but I don't believe I put the actual resolution in the slides.
Right. So I don't know with this, I'll defer Mr. Farnan. I don't know with the way this is written and without that in the slides or in the public record that we can vote on this. Is that correct?
No,
It
good.
is
Well, we could,
agenda.
yeah, it's on the agenda and it's a regularly scheduled meeting. It becomes a little bit more dicey when it's a special meeting. So what we would do is we would just, I would just ask Jane at the end of the report, if the committee members were comfortable, we would read what that recommendation would be. And it would just be, for the 2022 to 2024, audit years, the ACG committees recommend to the full board X funds or something like that.
Okay, I just want to make sure we follow appropriate protocol. Go right ahead then. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. I apologize for my video not working. It appears that after I did a software update last week, my Teams phone video works, but nothing else does. So I guess I'll be calling AdNet for that. If you could flip to the next slide, please. Okay, so every 6 years, we do have to change audit firms, and we do go out and put an RFP out in the marketplace for that. We did post an RFP on November 22nd onto our website. I did ask for this to be posted to the state of Connecticut website, but it appears that they did some changes within their payables system and their contracting system where we did not actually get this posted on our website. We have since worked through how to do that. So for future RFPs, we'll be able to get things posted to the state of Connecticut website. I did, however, send this to 4 firms, 2 of which were prior firms who had responded to our RFP either 2 years ago or 6 years ago, and to a firm who has been contacting us and has been interested in doing our audits, as well as a firm, another firm out of the New York area with government expertise. Out of those requests, we did only hear back from 2, which were PKF O'Connor Davies and Barry Dunn. We assembled a team within the Green Bank to take a look at this, where it's Bert Hunter, Brian Farnan, Eric Schrago, myself, Sean Cartelli, our controller, and Dan Smith, Associate Director of Finance and Administration. Currently, I have heard back from 4 of these folks, and it is unanimous that we are agreeing that we should be looking at PKF O'Connor Davies. Can you flip to the next slide, please? I think I got a little ahead of myself. We evaluated based on the firm's independence, their license to practice, and what they had for their latest peer review. Their qualifications and experience, the depth of their government team, similar engagements, which is probably the biggest factor here in my evaluation, and it seems to be the comments that have come through from staff as well, fees and references. What we found from the 2 firms that did respond is that Barry Dunn does have a lot of experience in doing solar, but their government team does not seem to have as many similar types of audits that they've done. They don't seem to be as deep. They may be more in the area of pension funds or not anything that would have a lot of investment activity like the Green Bank does. The engagements that PKF O'Connor has done, they have a very large breadth of municipal experience for a lot of bonding as well, which we have done quite a bit of recently, so that is relevant. What is very relevant for us, especially this year, is actually a GASB experience. And one of the things that we have to do this year is implement GASB 87 for leases. And in particular, that might involve a little bit of extra work where we might have to contract maybe for an additional anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 worth of work to make sure that we're covering everything we need to. And PKF O'Connor Davies seems to have a better team, that a dedicated government team that can handle these GASB implementations. In terms of fees, when you line them up right next to each other, they were within 3%. So it's really not a huge swing between them. And one of the things we will have to do this year is a federal single audit that was included in the quote for Barry Dunn, and it's an extra $7,500 in PKF O'Connor. And that includes when comparing the fees, it actually turns out that PKF O'Connor is 3% less than Barry Dunn, and that is all in with everything that we would expect to have performed for the audit services. Does anybody have any questions, discussion?
I'll open up to the board. Anybody have anything? And I do have a couple of comments. All right, seeing none, just in full disclosure, and this is Tom, I was not part of this process whatsoever. But I do, as some of you know, I know Brian Farnan knows, I did serve as chairman of the Board of Finance for the town of Fairfield, as well as now serve as a selectman for the town of Fairfield. And PKF is the auditor for the town of Fairfield and has been for quite some time. So I have had experience with this firm over a period of the last 10 years or so. My experience with them, just for purposes of our discussion, has all been very positive in terms of their knowledge, their approach, and the way they've worked with the team in the town of Fairfield. And not only did they do audits for us on the annual financial statements, I did, when I was chairman of the Board of Finance, put together a proposal for them to do an operational audit after it was found that we had some, shall we say, inappropriate behavior by members of the prior administration. And they produced a report that is being used by the town of Fairfield to tighten controls surrounding their operations within the company. So I'm happy to answer any questions for committee members as well from my vantage point of having worked with them before. Does anybody have anything? And Jane, just for the record, you and I have not discussed this. This was, I didn't know that you had picked them until this morning as well. I just want to make sure that, you know.
No, you and I have not had any conversations on this.
Anybody else? Any questions? Seeing none, is there anything else, Jane or Brian Garcia or Brian Farnan? I don't know. Or Bert, I see you're on here. Is there anything that members of the committee, Eric as well, my apologies, that you all want to say on this item?
Nothing for me. This is Bert. In agreement.
Yeah, this is Brian. Same thing, in agreement broadly. You know, transitioning from an auditor that we've had for the last 6 years, given some of their changes as well. It'll be a transition year for us as Jane gets used to the new team, but she's always great at that. So just fully supportive.
Great. Jane, before we turn over, what's the timing of this audit? When will they be in? You know, all that kind of stuff. Just how long is it going to take you to get up to speed? This is not a, we have to change auditors because our other ones have really timed out, as I recall.
Yes.
But a first year audit is always more difficult for the finance organization. Can you, before we do vote on this, can you just give us a little bit of color on that so this board's aware?
Typically what happens is during the month of May, they will do pre-work looking at a preliminary trial balance, which at that point will probably be May 31. The biggest thing for them is going to be looking at our control environment and just getting an understanding of the organization. Putting together their perm file of everything that they'll be carrying forward for the next 3 years. And a lot of that is duplication, really, of what was done by the prior auditor. They do generally go out and review the prior audit work papers, but it's really at a high level when it comes down to what's actually been performed and the things that are, within the records of CLA. A lot of that they're just going to have to recreate themselves. The biggest thing that they'll have to do is understand our organization and then do a review and a test of the control environment, financial control environment. When we'll be doing confirmations of account balances, that usually picks up around in May, and then we'll complete the close of the books and give them a final trial balance, and that usually ends up being pretty much within the first week of August. And from there, we'll end up working on financial statements and footnotes, and we need to have this done by 120 days after the close, so it's typically shortly before October 31st. There will be levels of review involved within the organization, the audit firm as well, where they will do a partner review, they'll do an internal peer review, and one of the things that held us up last year was going all the way up to it was a national review with a specialist, a government specialist. So that's why we try to get things done and pretty much start working on the financials within August so that we have September for review. And if anything falls out and needs to go up and down various levels of review again, we've also got most of October. So yes, you're right. It is going to be an onerous process this year. I'm not looking forward to it, but
Yeah.
First year is always the most onerous, for sure.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions on the recommendation or the process as we move forward, just so that we get everything out on the table, or any concerns or any comments? Is somebody talking? I'm sorry if they are, I can't hear.
I think that was somebody walking by my office, sorry.
Got it, okay. Seeing none, do I have a motion to, Brian Farning, can you read, please, the resolution that's not in here?
Sure. I think we say the members of the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee recommend to the full board this for audit services for fiscal years 2022 through fiscal year 2024. The firm, I'll let you say it, Jen, the firm of
PKF O'Connor Davies.
Okay. I did not have the full formal names. Thank you. That would be and we'll clean it up in the minutes too, but yes, that would be the motion to be made.
Well, can somebody make that motion, please?
Lonnie, so moved.
Do I have a second for that motion?
This is Matt, second.
All right, so we have the motion on the table to appoint the auditors for the next several years pursuant to the resolution as read by Brian Farning. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? All right, congratulations. We can move forward to the full board on that at the next meeting.
Thank you.
And by the way, thank you for your work on that. It's not, having done it many times myself, that's not an easy process to put together the RFP and actually select your new auditors that are going to, come in and beat you up for a few months. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go to agenda item number 6, the discussion of some key organizational metrics. And who am I turning this over to?
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. This is Brian Garcia. Yeah, so big picture, just stepping back, I wanted to set some context, but I also want you all to put your thinking caps on, bring your professional experiences here. So just at a high level, we included in the board packet, Jane and Dan put together one of the old monthly reports that we assembled. What you'll see is a really comprehensive, detailed set of financial statements. It's a lot of information, but what we're doing here today is we want to think about whether or not we want to shorten that detail, adjust the detail. So we used to provide this type of reporting back prior to the sweeps. It takes some time to assemble, although I'm sure Jane has made it easier given the software that we're now using, but it still does take a lot of time and effort to put together. So we left an example of a June 2021 financial packet for you to take a look at. Again, lots of detailed information in there. As a result of the sweeps, we really, back in those days, 2018, 2019, refocused all our resources on supporting the operations of the business. So rather than spending time doing those monthly financial statements, we were digging into lots of other areas as we worked to restructure the organization to implement the sustainability plan. But things, you know, as knock on wood, as we've seen, have settled down. The state budget is in order for now. So what we wanted to do was to think about how we might have a revised set of materials. So Brian, Jane, and I met with Tom several weeks ago to talk about it, and Tom had a great idea, which is, you know, how do we take all of that information and simplify it and ensure in the simplification that we're communicating to the right audience what our financial position is and key things that are important to communicate to that audience, specifically policymakers. So the goal is to try to get that long document into, you know, 3 to 5 key metrics, maybe more, that allow us to simply communicate where we are today with our mission and our financial position. Let's go to the next slide, Brian. So just to kind of like get us started, these are from the conversations that we had. I tried to simplify them a little bit, Tom, but you know, some of the things. So the target being messaging to political leaders, so the Connecticut General Assembly, the Executive Office of the Governor, as well as even thinking about our municipalities and how we communicate to them. So at a high level, some of the key criteria that we're thinking about are, first and foremost, you know, the efficient use of public resources. So we do receive public revenues from the Clean Energy Fund and Reggie allowance proceeds. It's about $30 million a year. So how are we efficiently administering those resources? And one way of thinking about that is, are we devoting that $30 million to projects, and what portion of that is going to administration? So obviously we want it all going towards projects. The second criteria would be around the organizational sustainability. We have been talking a lot recently about metrics, but think here about how we're generating earned revenues for the organization. So all non-public sources of revenue, like interest income, renewable energy credit income, power purchase agreement revenues, and the like. So how are those earned revenues increasing over time to cover our administrative expenses, our personnel and non-personnel related OpEx? And you might remember back in June of last year, we talked a little bit about some of those metrics, the sustainability metrics that we're seeing progress on since the sweeps. And then lastly, of course, is the impact that we're making as a result of investing those public and earned revenues, the public revenues that we receive in projects, the earned revenues that were invested in our people and processes to support the deployment of those projects, and what sorts of measurable impacts are those making in terms of, yes, deploying clean energy, but more importantly, the jobs that it's creating, the energy burden that it's reducing for the beneficiaries, the greenhouse gas reductions, and the like. So broadly, we're thinking, you know, 3 key areas of communication, but there might be others, and I wanted to stop there and get the group's sense of what you think about these key criteria for communicating our financial position and non-financial position.
Open it up for any questions or comments from any board member.
This is Lonnie. I mean, I like this. I think, you know, I'm hearing a lot of talk about greenwashing and green sheen, and, you know, really getting the measures to a point where, number one, we're confident, you know, when we do the $1 and $8 thing and all of that, but beyond that, how to communicate it in ways that we don't look like we're using too much energy speak, and and distancing ourselves from our audience. So I like this a lot.
Thanks, Lonnie. Others?
This is Matt. I agree with Lonnie, and I think these are really good metrics, but I take maybe a little different view. I would like to know these metrics, but I don't necessarily think they're the ones we want to lead with when communicating, when using our sort of bandwidth to communicate with legislators. I mean, sometimes what you provide is what they focus on. So I want to make sure we're making efficient use of public resources. I don't necessarily want to put it out in front of people because nobody's ever going to be happy with that number. There's always going to be a range that people find acceptable. I would think we would want to focus more on, accentuating the positives, let them know the rest of it, the organizational sustainability, the efficient investment, all that. And maybe even have a category for benefit multipliers. Like I'm thinking, for example, we should have a category for when we fund projects for municipalities or other public entities, because those have not just the benefit, they sort of have a residual benefit of reducing public expenses that benefit that sister agency or sister body. So I guess I would just have someone. I know Matt. I know we have several people who are elected officials who think about that. When you get a report across your desk, if it has a metric that you didn't necessarily ask for, it sometimes piques your curiosity and you dig into it. So I would just think about how we want to use this almost from a public relations point of view. If they ask for it, we should give it to them. But the stuff we're voluntarily putting out there should really be stuff have a reason to put in front of them and emphasizes the metric we want to put out in public. Again, not that there's anything wrong with our other metrics, but you only have so much bandwidth when you're communicating, with legislators and the public.
Are there, hey, Matt, I want to follow up on your comments, but I want to see if anybody else has anything on yours first. I think, Matt, you raised some excellent points, and I think the devil's going to be in really how it's presented and how it's packaged. And in fact, you're absolutely right. This is a public relations document, in my view. First of all, there's a detailed level document that needs to go to the board of directors that makes sure that we're running things efficiently, we're hitting our goals, we're hitting our objectives, we're measuring ourselves against the appropriate benchmarks and the things of the like, and that's for us to do as board members. Secondly, it's to go to our various constituencies, whether it's potential partners with the towns and what we can do for them and what our successes have been and how we interrelate with them. So I completely agree with you. And thirdly, as you correctly point out, it's the legislature and, how we're spending taxpayers' funds, the impact we're having, and the fact that the investment is effective. The one thing I will say, because you brought up public officials and how do we look at things, I come from a finance background and a company background. So in fact, for the last 16 years or so, when I have done budgets and things like this, I always start with the efficient use of public resources. Is government being efficient, or as efficient as we can, or is this efficient as last year in our utilization of public resources? I think if we don't talk about that, and I'm not saying you lead with that because I think your points are very valid, but I think if you don't talk about that at some level, it almost comes across as you're hiding it. And at least if I were one of the people that you were talking to, I would be looking for that and I'd be pressing on that immediately. So I think it's a balancing act is, I guess, the way I'd say it. But I think your point of caution is very well taken. Does anybody else? We're kind of.
I think Tom,
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I would just say I agree with all that. I think all of this would be good information to have, and then we need to decide, look carefully at the PR side of it, how we use the information, and just make sure
Yeah, because I think there's going to be a certain, and it's interesting you should bring that up, and Lonnie touched on it in her remarks as well. And I love the way Lonnie, I think he used the terminology green speak, right? And I think we have to realize that there's a lot of people that don't do green speak, right? And that we need to put this in kind of user-friendly language, which is, Matt, exactly what what you're talking about. As we present this to a broader audience and give everybody a little bit of what they're looking for. And I think the jobs thing, the energy burden, I think that also speaks well to people that maybe aren't as familiar with green speak as people like ourselves who are doing this for this bank,
This is Lonnie again. I definitely agree. It's a public relations document, and I'm thinking that it would be good to kind of fine tune, thinking strategically, having been in the legislature, the metrics for key districts.
Yeah.
Key legislators, so that we very much personalize it to districts that they know and care about. And and if we're not doing some work in certain districts, let's change that.
Yeah.
Certain key districts, like what projects have we looked at in certain places? Because I think basically it all comes down to what's in it for me. And so we really need to deliver that message.
I think we've done a lot of that in the past, and we rejigged a bunch of our district level reporting a couple of years ago. I think, Madam Chair, we would love your input on how do we fine tune that even more, and then how do we deliver that to the representatives? Because I think that one of the pieces of feedback that we received is that there's a lot of information flowing to the representatives, and I want to make sure that what we're providing sticks out and actually sticks in their head.
I agree. I would definitely like to be included in that. When I would take bills out on the floor, before I took over as chair of energy, it was, as the speaker said to me when he twisted my arm and said, "You need to chair this," is that everybody was using all this energy speak. And so many of the legislators felt, and particularly if they weren't on the committee, but also if they were on the committee, they felt like they were being left out. And to, I think, Tom's point, they thought things were being hidden. Right. And so I just purged green speak from all of my deliveries. And I actually I had one of my, from the opposing party stood up after I took out, actually it was when we created the, put energy into deep, stood up to thank me through the speaker, to thank me for actually using real language and bringing people in on the conversation, and really, doing it in a detailed way that didn't distance us from them, but brought them in to the process. And so that stayed with me because she's a member of the opposing party, and she stood up and made a big, very nice big deal about it. So that was helpful.
That's great. That's great feedback too. The the way I would kind of look at this, and I don't want to forget this, I'm going to equate it back to kind of my corporate experience, right? This is almost like a pyramid scheme of reporting, in that at the very base level, the management needs monthly reports and readouts that help you make effective decisions on a day-to-day basis. The board of directors need the next level up that gives you the key operating metrics that we should be focusing on a monthly or quarterly basis. The next level above that, and you can switch these, right, is really your customers. It's your sales pitch, your elevator pitch, your key metrics, your what are you doing for them. The next level above that is actually the legislature, and what does it mean to them, and what does it mean to their district. And an effective reporting package and an effective way to do that, you're not recreating the wheel every time, but it builds that pyramid so that you reach that conclusion. And then you don't have people like Jane and her team and Eric and his team running around trying to recreate things. It also is a way that everybody's speaking the same language, maybe at different levels, and maybe down at the management and the board level, we're speaking more green speak. And at the other levels, we're talking about the same things, but as Lonnie correctly said, you're kind of you're not talking to that very, for lack of a better word, educated constituency that's living in the green world. Does that make sense? And is that what this is trying to say we're doing? I'll turn that over to Brian and to Jane.
That's great. I love the analogy of a pyramid in this context. Monthly internal board, we'll figure out the timing, a set of board metrics, and then we go to the 3 C's. Tom, you use customers. We have 3 C's, customers, contractors, capital providers.
Right.
And then key one, the Connecticut General Assembly, the policymakers, so those 2 top tiers of the pyramid were who our primary kind of stakeholders are. So
right.
We'll take all of this as like guidance with the broader points of PR. We collect a lot of data. So the challenge is going to be for us to synthesize the data into standardized formats that communicates effectively to the end parties that we're after. And does it in a very standard, simple way. But this is great. I think this gives us enough, Eric, Jane, to work with in terms of building out our impact metrics combined with our financial standing metrics to get some recommendations in. And Lonnie, I think we'll lean on you too on the PR side, the political side as well. Tom, the other thing that really stood out at me when we had breakfast too was, you really want, for lack of a better word, the Green Bank, seal of approval, like on municipality projects and them standing up for you because you're saving them energy costs. So getting from this stuff to data and local people saying, yes, the Green Bank helped us. That's all. It's all one and the same, tied together.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Cool. This is great. I think we've got a lot to work from here. So we'll come back with some recommendations at the next meeting as we work to build this out.
Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns on this or our discussions on this? Anything else to add?
The only Tom, if I might,
Bert.
I think the only other thing I would add here is we've been doing a tremendous job, I think, over the last couple of years of attracting capital, particularly from the institutional markets, but also from ordinary citizens. And I think that we should speak to that as well, because it's just another pathway for us to provide an opportunity for the citizens of Connecticut, the residents of Connecticut, to be a part of this green economy by participating in the investments that we're making in their communities.
Very point well taken. Yeah.
4 C's. We'll add the citizen.
Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you, Brian. Thank you for the discussion. Next item, the agenda item number 7, the legislative and regulatory policy update. And Mr. Farnan, is this you?
This will be me, and actually, I'm going to give Matt Masunis the conch, and I'll let Matt lead if he's ready. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Attorney Farnan. I'm reasonably enough situated, but my quarantine toddler just woke up and brought me back to bed. So my apologies for the environs here. So both of our key requests legislatively this year relate to providing greater financeability. So for CPACE, our flagship commercial program, we're trying to give electric vehicle chargers and environmental resilience improvements greater ability to be standalone financed, rather than bundled with energy producing or energy saving improvements. For electric school buses, in implementing our current strategic plan, we were examining the electric school bus market over the last few years and finding that their financeability would greatly benefit from allowing school boards longer contracting terms for operational savings to pay off the higher CapEx on electric school buses. And then any residual here for technical cleanup, we may encounter items that have previously been reported into committees. For example, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Finance Account REFA is a defunct account associated with state go bonding, but it has this remaining reporting obligation on it. So in our most recent report into the E&T committee and previous ones before that, we said you may, if you like, clean up this area, but that's not an explicit ask. So keeping it short on that particular slide, but open to any questions or elaboration.
Does anybody have anything at this point?
And this is Brian. The one thing I would just add is that with our expanded scope into environmental infrastructure and resiliency, we didn't see this as the legislative session to be looking for any kind of big ask. We have been given such great authority and expansion of scope. That's really where we want to have our focus on the legislative powers that were just given to us, and making sure that we really take advantage of that and do a good job there.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, thank you so much, Matt, for walking us through. Brian, next item.
We'll move to regulatory. And the thing is with regulatory, I'll let Matt and Brian feel free to opine. What we're really seeing under the new chairperson under PURA is that energy policy really is being done at the regulatory level at PURA. And we've been playing a key role in that in the area of battery storage, residential tariffs, so we had this move from what was called a net metering over to a tariff. And I'm just thinking of our last conversation on GreenSpeak and not getting too far into that. And then, well, why don't I turn, Matt, if you want, this is your slide, so I don't want to steal your thunder if you want to give a quick 2-minute overview.
Yeah, the challenge always being conciseness when it comes to policy matters like this. So battery storage, the whole team's been busy implementing on the legislatively set target of 1,000 megawatts of storage by 2030, co-administering a new incentive program for property owner-hosted storage with the utilities. On the residential tariff, over the last few years, as state policy was transitioning distributed energy resource, my apologies, compensation from net metering to a new regime using tariffs, as they're calling it, we saw it as our obligation to engage there and ensure the sustainable, orderly transition for the in-state industry. And so with affordable multi-family properties now also eligible for that, we do see opportunities there for market development. On the non-residential tariff, same overall story of a transition in the compensation scheme for solar and other resources, but this one's competitively determined on an auction basis, like the existing state incentive programs for commercial properties. Shared clean energy facilities, this is a 6-year competitive procurement, it happens around each January, and it's aimed at underserved customers in certain categories, and these projects are in the process of deploying, going into year 3. It's growing in participation. New bid preferences were recently established, including for solar carports. And then there's a whole menu of other items that has been getting worked on regulatorily over there, including advanced metering, infrastructure rollout, non-wires alternatives, it's kind of colloquial fires, innovation pilots, giving an on-ramp for newer or pre-commercial or just starting to commercialize technologies to be used by utilities, implementation of utility EV charger incentives, that's been on a parallel track with the battery storage schedule, and so forth. We could list 10 more items right there, but for the purpose of time, I'll just open that slide up to questions.
Anybody have any questions whatsoever? Seeing none at this point, hey, thank you so much for walking us through that.
Thank you for the time.
Right. And then with the end of the year is a good time to do a little statutory report status. This is actually something that we put together through the advice that we received from our former chair, Matt Rinelli. It was a scenario where our statutory reports, the list of things that we have to present to the legislator and other various bodies and committees, which it's a pretty long laundry list of items. There were times in the organization's past when we were not achieving these on time, and it actually showed up in our audit filing. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's put everything in one place, and then we can look at how we're doing. And so I'm just happy to report that this process that we have put in place is working, and all of our statutory reporting requirements have been done on time for the past year. And a big thank you to Matt and Jane in particular, because a lot of this does fall on Jane, and Matt is kind of often in the role of herding the cats.
No, that's great. Congratulations on that. Quick question with Jane's talk about the first year audit and all that. Do we see any problems to get this done for this coming year as well? I don't want to be the chair of this committee that loses Matt Rinelli's great record of having us on time on all our reporting. So, you know, are we going to be okay this coming year?
With respect to the financial stuff, we'll be good because we have redesigned that so that it comes out of our reporting system a lot faster than it used to. And we do stand back and do an analysis on it and get it approved before we send it off. And that's the part that actually takes time now, not the actual preparation.
Great. Does anybody else, Brian, is anybody else reporting any concerns with hitting any of the non-financial targets here?
No concerns. I think the process is working now. We kind of, and it was not working, you know, when we originally started, but we put in place as a team a good process now.
Great. Thank you.
If you'll allow me, Mr. Chair, and under Attorney Farnon's leadership, this past year has been the best performance so far in terms of early deliverables on these reports.
There you go. Well, thank you. Mr. Farnon, nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? And that's the adjournment. Before we adjourn, can I ask that for our next meeting, what date is that if we have it in front of us, do we?
It looks like May 17th.
So which one? I'm sorry, is that March? Is that what?
May 17th.
May 17th. Thank you. Can we, Jane, at that meeting, can you step us through kind of your org chart for your accounting and finance area, just so that we're all on the same page as to what that looks like, and any hiccups or headaches you're having with your organizational chart? Not so much a review of the people, that's not what I mean, but, you know, are we staffed appropriately? Where are the pinch points? Where are the pain points relative to either controls or reporting or whatever your priorities are at that point? Can we do that for the next meeting?
Sure.
Great. I appreciate that. Anybody else have any comments, questions, or concerns before I call for adjournment? Seeing none, and look at that, we're 5 minutes early. So we'll give everybody like 4 minutes back. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Lonnie, so moved.
Thank you, Lonnie. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Appreciate your time this morning and your participation. Thanks to the staff.